So I'm going to give you a simple 6-point checklist. Utterly simple. So simple that you're like, what's so Einstein about it? And that is this. These are very simple 6 steps. No graphics, no pictures, no nothing. There's no need to be jazzy about this. It's just very, very basic. The first step is to define the objectives and KPIs. If you do not have a clear set of objectives and KPIs, no strategy can get executed. Second, and you can actually go in this particular order even, is to describe it in a plan. Like what exactly are you going to do? Break it into chunks. The third is find the resources and allocate it. This is the central economic problem, allocation of resources. And 4, execute the plan. 5, measure the KPIs. And 6, report the feedback and adjust strategy. If you can assess your organization against these 6 traits of strategy implementation, you yourself will know, are you going in the right direction or not? And that's as simple as that. Now I'll go into detail in each one of these one by one. This makes sense? Everybody with me? All right. Wonderful. So let me give you an example of what we mean by defining objectives and KPIs, right? So before you frame any large, big objective, you have to have certain things about the objective. What is the context of this objective? What's the time frame in which this objective is going to be executed? What are its dependencies, internal, external? And is this objective an aspirational one, or is this a more operational one, right? Something that people are going to do it on a daily basis, or something that is more aspirational? And what is it doing to achieve the business goal? Oftentimes, if this part is not correct, the rest of everything on the organization doesn't work. And this is normally the problem, is that poorly set objectives, poorly set KPIs result in poor outcomes. And I will challenge a lot of the organizations, large or small, if you don't have good objectives, like, look at your current objectives and tell me how many people really understand and make sense out of those objectives. I'll show you on the next slide. A good framework you can use for setting objectives and KPIs is OKRs. Anybody familiar with OKRs, objectives and key results? All right, great. So there's some folks that are familiar with OKRs. That's an excellent framework. So if you're able to, here's an example of an OKR or an objective and KPI. So look at the top one, launch Acme widget in Q2 with 300 daily active users. That's a very well-defined objective and a KPI there. Look at the next one, launch Acme widget in Q2. The difference between a good objective and a not so good objective is the 300 daily active users right here. That indicates whether this organization understands the why. Why would you launch widget? Like if you go and look at most plans, most objectives, like we want to go, do this, do that, but for what? The why. Does it actually contribute to the business goal? Often product management, one of the fundamental problems with product management is not aligned with the growth goal of the company, of the sales. A product management that is disconnected from sales in every step doesn't really is not useful to the company. Like the single purpose for the business to exist is the customer. And if there are no customers in the goal, that goal is not useful really, if it's not serving the customers. So I'm just illustrating just one simple objective and KPI. If you go back and look at each one of your objectives, each one of your KPIs, ask yourselves this hard question, like how much of the context is there? Is it about build, launch, growth, retire some product stuff? Does it have a time frame built around it? Does it have internal, external dependencies? What kind of business goal is it being met? Is it about usage? Is it about conversion? Is it about, some performance and availability factors? Unless you capture these things and yet make it simple enough that people can understand, without the objectives and the KPI, it is kind of very hard for the organization to do the rest of the work. And let me tell you one more important thing. You set this objective, but oftentimes, here's an example. If you aren't instrumented to figure out whether it's true or not, whether this is going to be successful or not, that again tells you where the problems are, right? There's a lot of organizations that cannot calculate the daily active users for their product. Assume it's a SaaS product, mobile product, whatever the case may be. So that itself is indicative of other systemic problems in the organization. Do you have the measurement instrumentation capability to have this number available real time for people in the organization to inspect? And so something so utterly simple like, hey, tell me how many people are using the product today, you will be surprised how many organizations in the world, even in advanced economies, cannot tell that quickly. So the next step is describing the plan. And I'm pretty sure all of you are very familiar with product roadmaps, sprint plans, Kanban boards, and all that stuff. The content is there in the plan, but the key is how are you devoting your resources in the work streams in these groups? So, for example, if most of your investment in time is in bug fixes, that's again indicative that the product is not stable, the product is having issues, poor requirements, or poor product development, leading to bug fixes getting most of the time priority in the product plan. If most of it is on sales, the organization is very focused on current business, unable to meet the needs of the customers that are using the product. So how do you bucket resources in terms of product development in these buckets, whether it's a sales, customers, bug fixes, or other aspects? And oftentimes you find in product planning sessions, this simple categorization is missing again. So it's important to figure out the objectives. Are they aligned towards meeting the business goal of increasing sales or increasing customer satisfaction or reducing poor quality at fixing the bugs? What exactly is the objective aligned to? And it can be more than one if you have separated out. But you as a product manager going into the organization and looking at the strategy, we want to gain market share XYZ product this much percent, but when the rubber meets the road, and double clicking that and getting to the product plan, and you see that most of the features that are being developed or most of the bugs that are being fixed are not aligned with that business goal, it's kind of very hard to meet the objective, right? So that's a very implementation concern. The third one is allocating the resources. You put your fancy product roadmap. You've said all these things are going to come out in this time frame, but wait a second. Do you have the right resources? Do you have the bandwidth? Do you have the right leadership in the organization, the culture to execute that? Is there adequate staffing? All of these are very important for the product manager to understand and communicate upstream, communicate downstream, and sideways to the organization. And a whole bunch of this comes in navigating the internal politics of the organization as well. Your ability to influence without having any direct reports, right? When you think about allocating resources from product manager angle, it's not about you having direct authority or power in hiring and firing people. It's more about influencing the resources, influencing the leaders in the organization to move towards these areas, right? And that's an art by itself. And then the next one is executing the plan. So if you look back from the top, you have the objectives, you have the content and description for these things, for this KPIs. Then you built the plan. Now you're executing the plan. What steps are in your product roadmap that align with shipping these features? Are they just MVP? Are they feature complete? Are they whole product? And how are the customers going to use it? So oftentimes, here's what I have seen in strategy implementation where the failure happens is people go and say, this is just an MVP, I'm just testing it. but there's no follow through of what happens after the MVP has been launched. You look at the 3-month plan, 2-month plan, 6-month plan. We are testing this. So the normal process, what happens is, this is just the first test, the MVP, minimum viable product, but there's no sequence after it, a follow through. What if that MVP becomes successful? What other things would you do to continue to build on it and get it to feature complete? Normal product roadmaps, I rarely find product managers making the due diligence to go and build these other aspects in it. So there's no hypothesis testing around those product roadmaps going in direction 1 or direction 2. No elements for this. These simple things can have immense value to the organization if you're able to think through and build it. And most importantly, is execution simply shipping? Is that what it is? Or is it beyond that, right? Is actually going and checking if people are using it. And that leads us to the next one, which is measuring KPIs. This is my favorite aspect of this entire strategy implementation, is what fundamental KPIs does your organization have for key performance indicators. And coming from a developer standpoint, it's very simple to look at Little's law, Kanban metrics. These are so fundamental. It's like laws of physics. Like I can take and look at an organization, look at a product team and tell, is it good or bad by just looking at these metrics. Throughput, right? How many items are delivered in a unit time? That's throughput. Very simple definition, right? So is the organization productive or not? Its productivity can be measured just by throughput alone. It's like, how many features are you deploying? Are you deploying it on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis? And how much is that, right? Great organizations that have high productivity will have high throughput automatically by definition, right? So just one metric really tells me whether this is a high performance organization or not. The inverse of throughput is cycle time, right? In a single unit of time, how much material moves. Cycle time is the time between those two columns in your Kanban board. Like, are you processing at a rapid pace or not? And that is another sense of urgency in the organization, ability to deploy things quickly. The rest of the organizational makeup can all be done by, and if you want to implement strategy, I would go and look at these metrics, instrument them inside the product, inside the process, inside the organization to figure out. And then work in progress, the relationship between work in progress, throughput, and cycle time, you can read Little's law and find out. But work in progress basically tells how much is sitting there, just getting work done. Because if you have high throughput, then your work in progress is going to shrink. At steady state, you will have higher throughput, smaller cycle time, and faster work in progress. But so those three are related, and it's super important as a product manager to understand when you study development metrics, how development teams, cumulative flow diagrams, how quickly they can spin up something and deliver this to the market. If you didn't have these metrics, each time you're going and asking, how long will it take for you to do this? How long will it take for you to do this? And there's all this back and forth. But a smart product manager would quickly understand through historical, cumulative flow diagrams, how fast can an organization produce these things? And what does it take for the organization to deliver at the time of planning, not at the time of implementation? It's mostly late by the time of implementation. Now, given all this, quality becomes essential after all of this, right? If you can produce fast stuff quickly, but it's always having poor quality, what's the use of delivering anything? So measuring the KPIs is an important aspect of implementation. The last one is this, similar to the metrics and measurement, is watching the customers, listening to the customers, talking to the customers. All these things are essential for adjusting strategy. It's not simply, as I mentioned before, executing means not shipping code, but actually seeing how it is being used, how this particular product feature is being used. Is it, the day you ship, you better have a hypothesis around, X number of people are going to benefit from this. X number of people are going to use this. And this is my expectation that, the success of this particular release is going to be determined by so many people using at this rate for this reason. There are so many features inside a product that people don't even click ever use. They're getting shipped every day. So much wastage, right? This is in the Kanban terms, muda. And so all that wastage can be avoided if you had real good hypothesis testing from the beginning. And the one way to do it is by first talking to customers before a single line of code is built. Like if you go back and look at your current roadmap, current sprint plan, current Kanban board, and ask yourself as a product manager, as an engineer, how many of those tasks on the board, how many of those things have actually come from talking to a real customer and figuring out that that is their need? Or is this just made up in a room? You will be surprised. The sheer number of things that are put on that development board that have are from not talking to customers. Anybody agrees with me on that? Talking to customers versus not talking to customers and putting stuff on the board. So if you think about it, that's all wastage. And then you spend so much time later addressing the customers' questions. Now, where do you get those insights? One insight is, of course, you first go talk to them. That's very, easier said than done. But there is low-hanging fruit in this. And that is listening to customers, users. How do you listen to customers? Like, are your sales team calls recorded? Are your customer success team calls recorded? That's a very simple thing. If your product is instrumented, process is instrumented, you can sit all day and listen to customer calls. And even better, you can just go shadow the sales team and get on the demos that they're doing to the prospects. I have rarely seen product managers engage at a level that they should be engaging in to get these. And so you have a world filled with lots of products that are just ever so slightly, not up to the mark. Only very few products are like delightful. Every product seems to have this or that, not working. Why is that? It's because not enough work is put into defining, and there's so much wastage of all these features around the product. If only people would talk to the customer, listen to the customer, and avoid all the chart junk, all the junk that's, we'd have less products, but more useful, more functional, right? This is, that's what design is about, removing all that noise and nonsense. Lastly, after you've done all this, watch the customers. If you watch, how the customers are using the product, there are all kinds of products these days, right? You can do mouse tracking, user tracking. There are products like Full Story, LogRocket, and so on. You can just see how people are using the product and get an idea about why is it that they're going through this particular customer journey or user path. Then, even as you deploy this, your competitors are also, it's not a static market. It's a chessboard. You make a move, somebody else makes a move too. And oftentimes, the strategy implementation seems to be one-sided, where you go deploy your strategy and sit back and expect some results. While you're implementing a strategy, somebody is countering that at that very moment too. Other people are waking up and doing the same thing or different things. How do you take that portion and go back and adjust your strategy? If your organizational process doesn't allow you for that, if you have not built a process of communication in the organization to build that, then no strategy implementation is successful. So, and that's the piece called back briefing. So you can look up back briefing, and it comes from a military term. Back in the day when militaries were having strategies, not only were they having briefing, but also the field officers would go back and brief the result of the execution of the strategy. So going and deploying the strategy is one thing, but how is it working? And can we adjust the strategy because of a counter move from the competitor or from listening to customers, understanding sales, and things like that can mold your strategy and quickly allow you to adapt to the market.